As we've mentioned maybe once or twice on What Culture Horror recently, 2022 has been a great year for horror movies. In terms of sheer volume, there's been so much for genre fans to sink their teeth into, and even better, the hit rate has been high. But of course, no hit rate is ever perfect, and while we've enjoyed excellent sequels, long overdue reboots, and imaginative new stories across the last 12 months, we've also had to endure more than a couple of stinkers. However, just a note before we begin. Some flicks with terrible reputations like The Requiem and The Mean One didn't release in the UK before writing this list, while some others simply slipped through the net. So with that disclaimer in mind, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 worst horror movies of 2022. Number 10, Choose or Die. Look, I'm a sucker for horror movies where someone has to play a demented game to either A, make it out alive, or B, secure themselves heaps of cash. However, even with that in mind, with the exception of, like, Saw, the majority of these movies admittedly never quite live up to their premise, and sadly you can lump in this year's Choose or Die with the worst offenders. On paper, this flick sounds like it's going to own. In it, our hero Kayla is cursed after playing an old school horror video game, and as such has to complete a series of challenges in the real world before she and her loved ones end up in mortal danger. In practice, there are some standout set pieces as well, including a brilliantly nasty one that I won't spoil involving a rat, but overall the flick just never quite comes together and will leave you a little bit frustrated at the missed potential. And when you have Asia Butterfield, Eddie Marsan, and Robert freaking Englund at your disposal, there's no reason for your horror film to be this unmemorable. Number 9, Goodnight Mommy. For a while, it seemed as though we'd moved away from the redundant American remakes of international horror hits, but Goodnight Mommy proves that that industry is still alive, if not quite kicking. Unlike the recent-ish remakes of Inside and Martyrs, there was admittedly some reason to believe that Goodnight Mommy could offer a new take on the excellent original, or at the very least, simply give us another solid version of it. With the casting of the always brilliant Naomi Watts, maybe this could have been a higher quality project than we all first feared. Well, sadly, initial worries became reality as soon as this trite cash-in was dumped on Amazon Prime. Playing like a staler, lower-effort version of the original, even Watts in the lead role can't imbue this remake of Goodnight Mommy with any life. If you've seen the original, you've no need to bother with this, and if you haven't seen the original, well, just watch that instead. Number 8, Uma. Well, spoilers, but on this list alone, we have Naomi Watts, Thomas Jane, Emma Roberts, Michael Shannon, and sadly, thanks to Uma, you can add the great Sandra Oh to the pile. Oh does her best with the material, but this story about a woman called Amanda who has to reckon with the trauma her dead mother caused her during childhood never does its weighty drama justice. Worried she'll become just like her abusive mum, her fear becomes reality when a spirit invades Amanda's house and attempts to possess both her and her daughter. Sounds like an interesting premise, right? Well, it might have been if we hadn't seen this kind of generational trauma horror movie done multiple times in recent years, and sadly, much better. Between the likes of Hereditary and Relic, stories about mothers fearing their own family and dealing with their own grief aren't particularly fresh. Even without this trend working against it though, Umar wouldn't be up to snuff, with so-so scares, a lack of tension, and writing that can't dive deep enough into its weighty themes. Number 7, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. One of the first disappointments of the year, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Legacy sequel is a textbook example of how to completely botch a franchise redo. Hopping on the bandwagon and picking up decades after the events of Tobe Hooper's original classic, 2022's Texas Chainsaw Massacre sees a group of rich city folk reignite a retired Leatherface's bloodlust. The franchise's original final girl, Sally Hardesty, is back as well in the Laurie Strode role of a now a battle-hardened survivor who wants a rematch with her old nemesis and finish him off once and for all. As you can probably guess then, the flick owes a huge debt to 2018's Halloween. Only by copying the same structure, it's unable to copy why that movie resonated so much with audiences. As such, despite trying to be a fan-pleasing legacy sequel, Texas Chainsaw 2022 actually only serves to piss off die-hard fans, including myself, especially with the portrayal of Sally, who is just completely wasted in this film. It's not Not without merit entirely, there are some striking images and imaginative kill scenes here and there, but as a story and, more importantly, as a franchise restarter, this failed effort is just not the foundation to build from. Number 6, Abandoned. Another movie that tragically wastes a talented cast this year, including Emma Roberts and Michael Shannon. See, I told you they'd be back. Abandoned is the kind of slow-burn psychological thriller that you regret dedicating 90 minutes to. Here, Roberts plays a new mother who moves into a haunted, isolated house in the country with her husband and child. After noticing some spooky goings-on around the home, though, she digs into its past and worries that a prior tragedy may be repeating itself with her family. Now, you know a flick is going to be bad when even the Amazon Prime description of it is riddled with grammatical errors. But what makes Abandoned such a chore is its absolute reluctance to offer up any creativity in the scares. Relying on tired old jump scare tactics, the filmmakers are unable to muster any tension in their slow burn narrative, and as such resort to boring loud bangs and shock value plot twists to try and elicit anything from the viewer. Roberts again is giving the material her all, but it's the kind of film that makes you question whether these big name actors need new agents. Number 5, Halloween Ends. What started off as a hugely successful attempt at reimagining the Halloween franchise as a sequel trilogy ended on a whimper this year with Halloween Ends. While the previous installment, Halloween Kills, divided the fanbase, Ends absolutely nuked it from orbit, ending the series with a left-field creative turn that nobody asked for. Marketed on the idea that this would be the final epic showdown between Michael Myers and Laurie Strode, Ends in reality is more concerned with a completely different character, which took fans by surprise to say the least. Now, subverting expectations is fine, welcome even, if the idea you're obfuscating is better than the one you're teasing. Sadly, that's not the case here, and as a finale to a trilogy, the story feels entirely hollow as a result. This subversion aside, the trilogy capper on its own merits still disappoints with a weak, unfunny script and social commentary so on the nose that it'll give you a headache. It's the kind of movie that's interesting on paper but a slog to actually watch. It makes you wonder whether this reboot trilogy would have been better off ending after the first movie. Number 4, Slayers. Horror fans love a good schlocky premise, so the concept of Slayers, whereby a group of internet celebrities are trapped with an aging vampire hunter in the home of one of the blood-sucking monsters, could have made for brilliant turn-your-brain-off fun. You've got Thomas Jane rocking a Rick Grimes beard and a leather jacket, buckets of gore, and a daft premise. With that in mind, you kind of almost have to be trying to end up with a terrible movie. Well, try the filmmakers did, as rather than a schlocky B-movie romp where the actors look like they're having as much fun as we are, Slayers acts as a career low for pretty much everyone involved. Despite throwing a lot of blood at the problem, well, eventually anyway, the writing and performances fall on the wrong side of cringy in every scene, while the grating influencer characters embody every lazy writing cliche that you can possibly think of. It's a 20-minute movie stretched out to 90, and it doesn't have enough action to distract you from its biggest shortcomings. Number 3, Grim Cuddy. Since the takeover of 20th Century Fox, we've had a lot of weird movies get dumped on Disney+. These leftovers are sometimes fascinating artifacts and hidden gems, and other times they're grim cuddy, just nightmare fuel for all the wrong reasons. Look, I just thought we were over stuff like this. We've endured the likes of Smiley and Slenderman that have poorly attempted to merge the worlds of online folklore and mainstream horror fare to absolutely disastrous effects before. So, did we need a movie in the year of our Lord 2022 about an internet meme that comes to life and starts killing people, mostly played for straight for a PG-13 audience? Like, I don't know, man, I don't think we did. But even cutting the premise some slack, haha, can Grim Cuddy deliver on its potentially creepypasta-style setup? Well, no you can't. The kind of horror movie that thinks you can just color grade everything a shade of brown or grey and call it atmosphere, Grim Cuddy is shockingly boring, lacking in any tension, and doesn't even have the good courtesy of being so bad it's good like Smiley. If you're considering putting this on, just have a laugh at the letterbox reviews instead and save yourself some time. Number 2, Firestarter. There have been plenty of Stephen King adaptations over the last 5 years or so, but with Firestarter we may have once again reached saturation point. It's the first movie of the modern King crop that I've seen anyway to truly fall flat on its face, failing to live up to the source material or any of its contemporaries. Despite boasting an up-and-coming director in Keith Thomas, Thomas, whose previous movie, The Vigil, was one of my favorites of that year. Stars Zac Efron and a score from none other than John Carpenter. Firestarter is one of the dullest, most frustrating horrors of the year. With a script that barely makes a lick of sense, it tells the story of a young girl who possesses devastating powers, being pursued by authorities who know of her dangerous gifts. Admittedly, that is the kind of premise that might be difficult to translate to film and might have been a better fit on Netflix. But the filmmakers seemingly didn't even try here, resulting in a total mess of a production that's too impenetrable for newcomers and too shoddy for King aficionados. Number 1, Jeepers Creepers Reborn. Listen, people on YouTube like myself like to exaggerate. I know that. We like saying this movie is the worst or you won't believe how bad this is. But in the case of Jeepers Creepers Reborn, you genuinely cannot over-exaggerate just how awful this thing is. Like, it has to be seen to be believed. Set in a world where the events of the first Jeepers Creepers inspired a shoddy TV movie and is a relatively well-known urban legend, Reborn acts as a reimagining of sorts for the creature who, with the help of a cult, traps would-be victims in his lair to pick off and eat one by one. Now, the first 10 minutes of this film are actually a redo of the first movie's opening as depicted by the aforementioned crummy TV movie, complete with terrible visual effects, amateur hour acting, and the worst color grading you've ever seen. The only issue is, once it swaps from this in-universe crapfest to the quote-unquote real movie, nothing about the filmmaking changes. It's just as shoddy. And from top to bottom, this is one of the shoddiest, lowest budget movies you've ever seen. With green screen work that's genuinely worse than what we can accomplish at What Culture, a plot that makes no sense, boring kills, and dreadful characters, the only way this film's existence makes sense is if it was a deliberate act of franchise sabotage to kill this rotten series for good. Full disclosure, I paid 99 pence to rent this movie and I still feel ripped off. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. And like I said at the very start, this list isn't exhaustive. Some things definitely slipped through the net. So let me know what you would have had on here and let me know if you agree with any of these picks. And while you're down there, if you could, please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to What Culture Horror for more lists like this on the regular. Even if you don't, though, I've been Josh. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.